draft, and you get actors to read that draft out loud, and the playwright's like, you know what, no, this doesn't sound good out loud, let me go for another few months in developing this. So by the time the finished product or the first performance is ready, it's usually, it can be anywhere from like 3 months to like several years after that first seed was planted. Whereas
it might have lost some of its potency by then.
Exactly. I've seen a few plays that definitely were no longer relevant because they had been written 2 years prior. And so they had kind of lost that initial impact. Whereas what We the People wants is, all right, we're putting out a prompt. Here are the guidelines. Get it back to us in the next 2 weeks. It'll be performed in a month. I mean, even though...
Oh, sorry, Amir, your sound is a little spotty.
Oh.
Yeah, and maybe just slow down a bit in case there's a lag. Sorry
Sure.
about that.
Sure thing. So We the People is more about immediately responding to the situation and putting something out there immediately. That's why one of the reasons we have one of the guidelines is that it has to be between 3 to 5 minutes. Usually, sometimes a piece can be around 7 or 8 minutes, but nothing longer than that.
Yeah.
Because we definitely want more voices. So we'll try to usually have anywhere between 10 to 12 pieces in one night. And so that's why they have to be a certain length.
Okay, yep.
But also with how quick things are happening in the news on a daily basis, sometimes even after we've picked a piece, 2 weeks later when it's performed, it will have sometimes lost its drive. So we also always leave it open to the writers to send new drafts and to keep it an active piece until we rehearse it.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. We had a director speaking about art as a living thing, and how it is always kind of evolving. So we're learning as the kids are writing their own pieces.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so as the writers and the directors, they do kind of have that extra freedom to modify as they go, or I guess as they discover maybe that this isn't really what they want to say. Or do you ever find that as you're working on a piece, you decide you want to change directions?
Definitely. Definitely. I think as artists, we may have one message to put out by the time a performance comes, that message is no longer really sitting with us. It's no longer the top of our to-do list of things we want to put out there. And we have that freedom, that especially if it's our own work, to change it, and to make sure that it stays timely.
It's really cool. I'm glad you said that your projects you try to make them within 3 to 5 minutes, because that's kind of the time frame that we gave the kids to make a project, not too much longer than 5 minutes. It's just, I think it's really good to hear that that formula doesn't change no matter how
more voices.
Yeah, like no matter how many voices or what project you're doing, like it's a good time limit to send your message out, and that it can be done over and over again. That's awesome.
And then if you get good at writing a story in 3 minutes, it's actually easier to write a 10-minute story or a 30-minute story because you figured out that structure in such a constrained time.
And it also helps in cutting away some of the
Inessential.
Exactly, some of the inessential stuff, so that you get right into the meat of it. Yeah, so that you don't need that, hi, how's it going? Nice to meet you. It's almost like the scenes are starting in the middle of a story.
Yes.
A story that's already happening.
Yes, cutting right to maybe the inciting incident, or cutting right to the climax, maybe, if we're thinking story structure. Okay, That's great. Thank you so much. Do you guys have any questions for Amir? I know Calder, you're just joining us. Yes, hello? All right, what's your question?
Have you met any famous people?
They ask that of everyone that comes.
That's our that's the
That's
first
our
question.
first question, no matter who's
Well,
visiting.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask.
All right,
Yeah.
then.
Wasn't there to ask it?
I've met a lot of famous people. I've worked with a lot of famous people. Yeah, it's part of the nature of living in LA and working in LA. You're always going to work with famous people when you're cast on a TV show, sometimes when you're in theater. And since
Do you want to talk about one of your favorite acting experiences with someone that they might know?
someone that they might know.
Well, they're very young, so they don't
I
know
know.
anybody under 20.
I know. I'm like, who are people that they might know that I've worked with?
Well, you were on a Nickelodeon show. Did I see that in your reel?
Yes. I got to be on Game Shakers. I don't know if that is it still around. I feel like Nickelodeon shows have such a short time
They do
span.
have a short shelf life now. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
So I shot that one like 4 years ago, maybe.
Oh, okay. What would you say was your best experience on a set?
On a set. I think it was actually my very first one was Two Broke Girls. It was my first time being on TV, and there was a bunch of new people who were also that was also their first gig. So we were all hired for the week. And so it was cool to be around such a welcoming group of people, and the main actors on that show were all really kind and welcoming, and there was something magical about just being on that kind of set for the first time. And even though Two Broke Girls is a show I never actually watched, I'm not, even though I love doing comedy, for some reason sitcoms just don't really
I hear you.
Yeah, unless they have like some like dark underbelly in them.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
But those two main actors, the two women playing the girls, they would do one take, and then you would see all the writers immediately get together, write something. They would immediately hand them a new script, and they had to learn it like that and shoot it like a minute later. So those two women, tons of respect. I mean, they were learning scripts within minutes because the writers were constantly saying, well, let's try this joke instead, or let's try this joke, or we want to see what it would look like to if you said this instead. And so they were constantly on their toes, and it was really cool to watch.
Wow, that's how liberating. I love that you touched upon the kindness sort of leading to the magic moment, because we had our director friend saying that really what you need to get those magic moments on a stage is a dream team of people, so that you look around the stage and you realize you trust every single person in that cast, and then you know it's already going to be good.
It is. I think that some of my favorite experiences with being on stage in particular is when it's a whole team of people, and when I'm working with someone who no matter what I do on that stage, that person has my back and I have their back.
Exactly.
And there's a comfort that you can do crazy, weird things, and that person will follow along, or you'll follow them along.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we have a question from Meow, Nelly, otherwise known as Nelly.
What's a time where things went terribly, horribly wrong?
What's the time that things went terribly, horribly wrong?
Or like the worst one you had to do?
On the other side.
The other side.
I mean, there have definitely been incidents where things have gone horribly wrong, but of course we've all I mean, it's kind of the nature of theater. You never know when something can happen on stage. And so there was this play that I was in where there were all these different forms of puppetry happening. Like every scene was like a new kind of puppeteering happening. And there was one sequence where all the puppeteers, like it was all taking place underwater. So all the puppeteers were on their backs on these like rolling carts. And we were holding up fishes on the end of sticks. So it was this big underwater choreographed thing. And since we could never really see where we were going, because we were on our backs, you know, scooting like backward, it was crazy learning it. It was very choreographed, like turn the fish this way, turn the fish this way, turn the fish this way. So one of the performances, in one of the scenes before, one of the lights, something had knocked one of the lights and it had fallen onto the stage and just shattered everywhere.
Whoa! That's really scary.
That's pretty bad.
So the light had shattered everywhere, and like we were getting ready to go on stage and be on our backs, rolling across the floor.
No.
So luckily, the artistic director, the artistic director halted the show so that the stage could be cleaned up and
my goodness,
and become safe for the actors again.
Oh my God! And was the audience already seated?
Oh yeah, no, this scene takes place in the middle of Act 2.
Oh dear!
Ooh.
Oh my God, that's funny.
and that's pretty scary stuff, because like stage lights can be like 50 pounds,
Right?
so, and like hanging like 30 plus feet in the air. So my goodness,
That could have been dangerous.
Woo!
Does anybody else have a question? We have kept
I think I
you.
saw Ava had.
Okay, Ava, do you have a question? Go ahead. Go ahead, love.
What was your favorite performance?
What was my favorite performance? There have been a few. That same show with the fish.
Oh, interesting.
That same one is actually one of my favorite shows I've ever been in. So that play is called Wood Boy Dogfish, and it's a version of Pinocchio, which is really close to the fairy tale, to the original dark fairy tale, and closer to that than the Disney story, than the Disney movie, which is pretty dark anyway. But in that show, not only was I playing Fox and having a lot of fun with the person who played Cat, because the two of us were kind of a unit, but also even when we were not on stage, with all the puppeteering, it was so crazy because I don't know how many costume changes I had in that show. It's like the moment I left the stage, I would immediately have to like throw something on, grab a different puppet, run back on stage. And the director actually did a time-lapse video of the backstage element of the show. Because most of Act 1, I was on stage, but most of Act 2 was me running around backstage. So for Act 2, the director got a good time-lapse video of how crazier it was backstage than it was on stage. And I think that was one of my favorite shows, because that was one I like shows that are not only challenging physically, but also shows that from the moment it starts, you're on a roller coaster that you cannot get off.
Yes, a whirlwind, and it's over before you know it. Like,
and by the end of it, you're so tired that you don't even know how you did that.
Yeah. That is the best. That is the best. Any other questions before we? Yeah, go ahead, Nellie.
Can you tell us a different time where everything went wrong? I like
a different time where everything went
you
wrong.
Like those stories? Maybe not everything.
Tell me how you almost died.
Everything. It's hard to think of instances where everything went wrong that didn't become something good out of it. I mean, I've been in shows where, because the theater had a leaky roof, they had to cancel the show because they didn't want all the actors to get electrocuted.
That's thoughtful of them.
That is very thoughtful of them. But something that went incredibly wrong.
I had a set collapse on us one time,
Really?
an entire wall, like dominoes, one at a time, all the
no.
way.
Oh no.
That was pretty bad. Yep. I also had a cow moo right in the middle of my line one time. A misplaced sound cue. So I'm just speaking my speech, and right in the middle of it, moo. What do you do with that? Where do you go from there?
When things like that happen, you kind of have to improvise, because if you heard it, the audience heard it, and
Yes.
instead of saying that wasn't supposed to happen, you kind of have to think on your toes and be like, who let the cow?
The audience wasn't there at practice. They didn't read the script. They don't know what's supposed to happen.
It's true. Cows can't read scripts, but depending on the world of the play, you have to act like that was supposed to happen, or have some sort of, you have to immediately think on your toes and have some excuse.
Yeah.
I've been in shows where I was once in a show where a musical where I'm grabbing someone and bringing them across the stage with a knife to them.
Okay.
And the robe that I was wearing was a little too tall for me. So as we're walking backwards, I accidentally stepped on my robe, and the two of us fell over and went sliding across the stage. And so we still got up, and we're still kind of growling at one another throughout that. But of course, the moment we got off stage, we could not stop laughing. And we had trouble making eye contact at each other throughout the rest of the show, because we would just immediately burst into laughter.
That's funny. I think Calder had his hand up for a second. Calder, what's your question?
Oh yeah.
Oh, have you ever done your own stunts?
Yeah.
Sounds like yes.
What was one of your favorite?
What was one of my favorites? In theater, you kind of always are doing your own stunts. So
what you were just talking about, rolling across on your back, is quite a stunt. Yeah.
So, I did a lot of shows. I performed with the clown company for several years. So I was always falling down in some way, or being thrown in some way, and
yes.
And yeah, I think I don't know. I think when you learn how to fall, and because there are definitely safe ways to fall and very unsafe ways to fall. But I think, as I was saying earlier, once you're working with people that you trust, those elements of danger, they're not really dangerous, they shouldn't be dangerous, but those elements of being thrown around and falling, and those become way more fun.
Yes, and less stressful for the audience when they know that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Andrew actually taught a workshop at a camp I did 2 years ago on how to safely fall.
And Nellie was there too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, I think we kept you a little bit longer than I said we would keep you.
Oh, it's okay. My class was canceled, so.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. I so appreciate your time and your insight. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the kids, as they're all working on a project of their own with a theme of making change, whether that's within or in the world? And, I think they all want to understand how to make their projects relevant, but it's a lot to write and direct and cast and block and light and shoot and edit. So is there any advice that you would give them on sort of how to stick to what matters?
I think the most important thing you can ask yourself is what the story is, what the message is that you're trying to get across. That's always the most important. That's always the most important thing, because if you take away any of like the craziness that you want to do, like any special effects, lighting, It all comes down to what is the story and
People
why.
rolling on their backs with fishes.
Exactly, people on their backs with fishes. But that was important because it was part of the story, because it was Pinocchio. It was Pinocchio.
Clearly, if you went to all that trouble to do that, it must have been essential to the story.
No, it was Pinocchio drowning. But you know, it all comes down to what story you want to tell and what's the message you want to get across.
Awesome.
Oh,
Okay.
another question.
Do you have time for one more? Okay, go ahead.
So, in the original story of Pinocchio, he hangs Jiminy Cricket. How did you do that part?
Well, he crushes Jiminy Cricket.
Oh.
In the original story. So we had, Jiminy Cricket is not really much of a character in this version, but we did have a cricket. We did have a cricket that Pinocchio smashes. But in the original Pinocchio, Pinocchio is hung.
Oh yeah.
Pinocchio is hung, and so the way we did that was, and also his legs are burned off.
Cool.
Wow.
His legs are burned off. So yeah, the original Pinocchio is really,
really dark.
Because the original Pinocchio, it was not supposed to have a second act. It was a morality story, so it actually ends with Pinocchio dying. But the writer wanted more money, so he wrote a whole second act, which is why it's so different. Why they're so different. But the way we did it was, when Pinocchio, we had these amazing prop designers who invented this one of those things that like fans the flames, where you're like pushing down on it, and it's like, so while I was doing the big like pumping of the flame, one of the puppeteers, who was dressed all in black, was changing Pinocchio's legs from like the real legs from the regular puppet legs to like the burned off legs.
Okay.
So the audience wasn't seeing that. And then we put Pinocchio on a pulley system, and he was actually left hanging over the audience during intermission.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
we had some people leave at intermission because that was a little too much for them.
It happens. I mean, with powerful theater, occasionally it's too much for a couple.
At the very least, that means they're thinking about it.
Yeah,
No,
that means
definitely.
it provoked a feeling,
Yeah.
for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amir.
We really appreciate you joining us. This was so great. If there's nothing else, we're going to let you get on with our day, and we're going to get on to talking about stage lighting.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Have a good
Okay.
one.
Thanks. Say thanks, guys.